Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Sahar Saeed, and I'm delighted to be your host as we discuss this and explore this critical and timely topic. On behalf of Hidayat Ali Maudhi and ASA Pakistan team, I would like to welcome you all on this webinar, Strengthening Foundation Learning and Assessment, Challenges and New Pathways. Foundational learning encompassing basic literacy and numeracy is the cornerstone of equitable education and lifelong learning. Yet, as many of us know, countries like Pakistan continue to face significant challenges in this area. While there has been progress in enrollment rates, assessments consistently reveal that a large proportion of children in primary schools lack the foundational skills they need to thrive. Globally, the statistics are stark. 70% of children in low and middle income countries cannot read and understand a simple text by age 10. Pakistan mirrored this alarming trend with systematic barriers like insufficient teacher training, under-resourced schools, and socioeconomic hurdles compounding the problem. These challenges have only been exacerbated by global disruptions like COVID-19 and recently climate-induced crises. We mark this year, 2025, is particularly special because ITA marks its 25th anniversary. And recently also the International of Education date just passed, and we thought that ITA has actually been deeply invested in the large-scale assessment because we've been conducted as an assessment for the last decade. And this particular area on large-scale learning and assessment and foundation learning is very critical for all of us. So particularly this webinar will discuss the critical challenges in foundation learning and assessment, will share global best practices and explore actionable solutions for Pakistan and also low and other middle income countries. We are very delighted that the webinar brings together a distinguished panel of policymakers, education experts, researchers, and thought leaders to delve into the challenges and explore actionable solutions with all of us together. We are extremely honored to have with us today Salim Salama, the First Secretary Development and Policy Advisor, British High Commission. Salim, posted in Pakistan, is working on education and health and demography brief. His area of interest and work include understanding the constraints of building state capabilities and effective public institutions for service delivery. He has studied at the University of Oxford, and he has been working with FCDO earlier. Thank you very much, Salim, for joining us. We also have with us Dr. Shahid Saroya, Director General, Pakistan Institute of Education. Dr. Shahid leads and manages the National Education and Research Policy and Programs for the Ministry of Federal Education and Professional Training. He has over 20 years of experience in the education and research sector with a proven track record of academic leadership, governance, and administration. Shahid Saab will also be joining us in a minute or so. We also have with us Pranav Kothari, Chief Executive Officer, Education Initiatives. Pranav is the CEO of Education Initiatives and has headed Mindspark, EI's large flagship edtech product for K-12 schools, and large-scale, high-quality student assessment and impact evaluation services for government. He is a TEDx speaker and Inc. Fellow and named by the World Economic Forum as the Corporate Social Entrepreneur for the year in 2019. We are extremely honored, Pranav, that you have been able to join us. Thank you very much. We also have with us Ms. Noreen Hassan, Educational Specialist, Policy and Coordination, UNICEF. Noreen is a seasoned education policy specialist with extensive experience in strengthening national education system to improve learning outcomes for the most disadvantaged children. Her expertise spans program management, policy analysis, innovative education solutions, including digital learning, foundational skills, inclusive education, and alternative learning pathways for out-of-school children and adolescents. Thank you, Noreen. We also have with us Ms. Iza Farah, Senior Education Specialist, World Bank. Iza is a Senior Education Specialist. She has over 20 years of experience working with consulting firms, INGOs, and multilateral institutions on education reform. She has led several large-scale education programs, including the FCDO-funded Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa sector program in Pakistan. We also have with us Umar Nadeem, Head of Advisory Tabat Lab. Umar has worked at the intersection of evidence, technology, and policy with experience in policy analysis, design and management of large-scale programs and digital transformation. He has led multidisciplinary portfolios advising government and corporations with a track record of frontier thinking, boosting innovation, and managing high-performance teams. Lastly, we have Armando Ali, CEO of PAL Network. Armando joined PAL Network in July 2021 as a Chief Executive Officer. He previously worked with UNICEF as a senior advisor on and ensure northern Mozambique, mobilizing citizens to participate in ensuring delivery of quality public services. Thank you so much, Armando and others, for joining us. Lastly, we have Bela Zaza Jameel, who will be moderating the discussion for today. Thank you so much, Bela, for agreeing to do this for us. Bela, CEO ITA, Idara Talim Aghi, is a distinguished national and global leader and the first Pakistani recipient of the prestigious Asia Education Medal 2024. With over 40 years' experience in evidence, policy, and large-scale education innovations, she has significantly contributed to improving education in Pakistan. She leads the citizen-led assessment and many other initiatives at ITA. And also, she has been a member and serving various boards, including PAL Network, IBE, UNESCO, member chair of CAMEL, etc. Bela has a wealth of active experience on assessment for action, and I hand it over to her to take the discussion forward. Thank you very much, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. It's just such a pleasure to welcome all of you today to this very important webinar on strengthening foundational learning and assessments, challenges and new pathways through technology and AI. It is particularly great to see how the momentum, which started in 2022 with the Transforming Education Summit, we've seen things move on, and we've seen that organizations across the world are so invested in this area, and we hope that we'll be seeing a fast-track initiative just about everywhere in the world, as we've seen that Africa has been taken by storm on foundational learning, and we'll hear more about it. But right now, in the interest of time, and I hear that Pranav has to leave early, so if you don't mind, maybe we can begin with Pranav's comments. And I met Pranav recently in Dubai, and the fact that they are working across several countries, it would be very useful for us to understand from their experience. And I'll ask the question, and you've got about 10 to 12 minutes to speak on your experience, Pranav, with MindSpark and large-scale assessments. How do you think technology-driven assessment approaches will also not just do diagnosis, but provide solutions to accelerate learning? What lessons from the Global South in your experiences can be applied to improving foundational learning in the ecosystems of South Asia? So over to you, Pranav, because we want to hear from you how you are framing the issue and what solutions you have to offer.
Great. Good morning, everybody. And thank you, Dr. Bela, for this opportunity. I think there has, of course, been a lot of emphasis on foundational literacy and numeracy, both in Pakistan and India, and I think globally in many other countries. So what I will do today is just present a way of how we are using digital technology to measure beyond just a data entry, and what insights that has led, and why discovery of that is critical towards then building a learning tool, right? So I see diagnosis and remediation or learning as two different pillars, much like how the medical world has a full world of blood tests, x-rays, MRIs, on the diagnosis side, and then on the remediation side, you have medicines, therapy, surgery, and things of that nature. There's always a lot of debate about edtech, so please feel free to write challenging questions in the chat. But let me just show you a little bit of what we have done in this field on the ground in poor remote parts of India, very similar to Pakistan. And as a consequence of that, what are we finding to be able to, interesting insights on this that would be beneficial. So my name is Pranav, and first and foremost, I think there is always EGRA and EGMA that's spoken about, but both in Indian languages, Urdu and other Pakistan languages, there's so much more in these languages that you need to develop an almost new FLN tool to be able to capture that. So we've focused on children aged between 5 and 9, or grades 1 through 4. We've done this in 3 Indian languages, but we have the capability to do more. The tests are usually 20 to 25 minutes, and we've done with both the paper version and the digital version to be able to see the equivalence between the two. The skills that are getting tested, why I say that we need to do more than what EGMA does is because our languages and the way language acquisition happens is different from the English one. So these are a sample of the skills that get tested, and of course you can decide which ones to do and not do, depending on the context and the intention of the test. So this is what most of you have seen a paper-based assessment would look like, right? It would have a set of questions. There would be a invigilator or a facilitator who would be asking them. They have instructions on the right side, or a tool that is available. In our case, we also measure time for some of the sub-skills to see if the children can do it within a certain time frame. And I think many of you hopefully resonate the challenges associated with the pencil and paper-based approach, right? I think the biggest one is inter-rater reliability on how do you achieve standardization, because finding an evaluator who can, calm down a child, create a fear-free environment, not instinctively help them, it's just so difficult to do in these remote parts. Like, how do you recruit the talent, train them, and hope they show up on the day of the testing? So I think that has been an issue. Second is just the cost, because this talent is not cheap, and at a time they can only do one student at a time to do this properly. So the cost per child goes up. And then a lot of the data, is it's not of the child, right? Like, they listen to the child, they see the child, and then they write it, they codify it. So a lot of the data gets lost in terms of what the source of the data is. I'll show you how these things can be solved by technology. But prior to this call, Isa also reminded me all the challenges of technology, which is familiarity with using tech. Are some students at a disadvantage? And the way we've tackled that is by giving practice and establishing the equivalence between the results from a paper and tech in a scientific study. The cost per child actually can go down if you utilize the tablets properly, and because you can also get up to 4 students being simultaneously tested with the person there. And to solve for power and internet, we largely use tablets and offline, and you can synchronize them when you get to the office. So what the app can do is, first and foremost, it's done by the student, right? So unlike a Tangerine, unlike Google Forms, unlike many of these things, this is not for data entry by the facilitator. This is where the student directly takes the FLN assessment on the cheapest Android phone that you can find, and you don't need internet during the time of the test. We've done, thousands of such students across the length and breadth of the country, and done this in, 5 different languages to be able to test this thoroughly. So what that does is, some parts of this look familiar through the ESSER tool where you're checking for letter, word, but the parts where it can start differentiating is when you can measure the reading fluency and capture the entire voice of the child. In numbers, you can do many interesting stuff, because you can look at how much time they are taking in addition, multiplication. You can look at what keystrokes they are making, what they're doing. You can have question types that check for working memory, many of those things which paper assessments struggle to do. It's relatively easy to sort of select a school, pick a particular student, get the test started, and hand over the tablet to the child to sort of take things forward. So just to sort of help you see, what you will see on the left is what is the screen, and on the right is the actual footage of the child. So the first one to get us started.
यहाँ आपको कुछ वाक्य दिखाए जाएंगे। उन्हें चौक अब सुबह होगी। अब आपको वाक्यों
And one more.
मिनी एक बिल्ली है। मिनी रोज चूहा पकड़ती है। एक दिन मिनी चूहा नहीं पकड़ पाई, वह भूखी थी, वह
And so what you can see is that, nobody is transferring this to a letter level, word level, paragraph level. You're actually capturing the full footage. And that is what a central set of language experts can draw inferences on, right? Similarly on math.
उस पे उंगली रखना है जो बड़ा संख्या है, फिर पीला बटन दबाना।
8 9 17 60
And you can measure the time between the keystrokes of the child as well. And it's of course clutter-free and designed particularly for this. So we've cut out the parts of the keyboard that are not necessary. And now, when you get the experts to do this, they can actually listen to the audio file and they can actually mark whether something was said correctly, whether they skipped it, whether they sort of ran out of time. And what that does is it sort of then standardizes the way you correct, right? So now every child is treated fairly because you can thin slice the questions and the same person can do thousands of students, as opposed to one person correcting all the skills for tens or hundreds of students. So I think you get a far better reliability as a result of this. And then, when we looked at it, of course, we found a massive 1.7 standard deviation difference between private schools and government schools because we measure all ends of the spectrum. But you also come up with interesting insights, which the typical, FLN assessment isn't able to do. For example, when students make matras mistake, we can statistically say that E ki matra is more difficult than U ki matra. We can say sanyukt akshar, where you have a half letter conjoined words. And so many such insights come out because you've captured data in its raw, authentic form. Similarly, on mathematics, beyond saying that half of grade 5 students can't do grade 2 math, what you can actually see is where they make mistakes, right? So for example, on the bottom left, you see that when students had to do this, they were not essentially doing the carryover. You might sometimes find that they in the middle one, instead of doing 81 minus 49 and doing carryover from 8 to have 11 minus 9, the child just did 9 minus 1 is equal to 8 and 8 minus 4 is equal to 4. So they just subtracted whichever number was bigger. So again, I can tell you 13 different ways that students
have
got
2 more minutes.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay. So finally, I think, largely you can do this at a cost-effective manner because you can have one enumerator doing many of these. And what we're doing now is from these insights, we're using generative AI to do scoring of oral reading fluency in partnerships with other organizations. To be able to do this. And then this allows you to build dashboards at a national level, state level, district level, block level, school level, down to the student level to make this useful for district officers, teachers, principals, and see trends, within the thing. So this is my final slide in terms of, how we find this foundational literacy numeracy. One is as an outcome, we're an outcome evaluator for our development impact bond, where NGO is actually doing FLN training on the ground. We're doing this where state governments are doing this in Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh. We're helping the government of Tamil Nadu sort of test almost 1.6 lakh students in a single week on FLN. We're creating tools that can then help learning software that can help students master FLN and also evaluating different other edtech partners. In general, of course, I am vocal a proponent of use of technology, both for diagnosing and for remediating. It obviously has all the pitfalls that you can think of, but over the last 20 years, we've just systematically looked at it, tackled it, addressed it, and looking forward to hearing what's your biggest issue in measuring FLN and in improving FLN skills, and would love to partner to make something happen. Thank you, Dr. Bella. That's it from my side.
Thank you very much, Pranav. That was extremely insightful, and to hear what is happening in the neighborhood. And of course, we are recording everything, and we will be sharing the presentation that you have with everyone who's attending today, and also more largely. But thank you so much for framing it, how this is being attempted digitally and through AI, even in South Asia. I want to now come to Dr. Shahid Siroya, who's the Director General of the Pakistan Institute of Education. And I hope Dr. Shahid Siroya is here. Dr. Shahid Siroya, it would be very important for us to know, because so much has been happening at the Pakistan Institute of Education under the Ministry of Federal Education and Professional Training in terms of how to strengthen the role of assessments in identifying learning gaps at the national level. And really, also you were exploring the scope for digital assessments. Is there space for that? But more importantly, in your efforts to want to ensure that we are being able to look at a national metric for foundation learning, and given the National Education Policy Framework 2024, how do you see that the common assessment for foundational learning is going to feature there? What are your plans? How can all of us work together to ensure that Pakistan can address these challenges of foundation learning and learning poverty? Over to Dr. Shahid Siroya.
Thank you very much, Bela. And let me start from NET 2023. I mean, with the DARE support, of course, we were able to launch it last year, and we identified the areas, learning crisis, and that is there. Another very important study, the results are about to come. We went for the international assessment and participated in LANA. And that's the results we are waiting, and hopefully in February those reports would be launched. One important area where I believe is very important for the PIE perspective and for the Pakistan perspective, that National Education Policy Framework was launched, and we worked on that framework, and there's a consensus across Pakistan, coming from the provincial sides and the federal side, that the early years are important, the early grades are important, and that's the kind of other areas. Sorry, I'm audible? Bela,
You're audible.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Please go ahead. Please go ahead. Please go.
Bela, can you hear me?
Dr. Shahid, we can. Please go ahead.
Just wanted to confirm. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. I think Bela might be having issues. So one thing is important, that we focused on early grades, and there's a very important step and the federal ministry is taking, that we are first time entering into foundational learning assessment. We have been doing assessment for the grade 4 and 8. This time we are aligning with the UIS, and we are going for the grade 5 and 8. But the most important is the step we have taken and entering into foundational learning assessment would be, of course, the very important support coming from the DARE side. That's from the PIE side, but then there is another an important step. We started working on the standardized national assessment framework, and took on board not only the private sector but the provincial counterparts who are working on assessment, and we are in process of finalizing that standardized national assessment framework. Coming to your key question, that's how we can see the digital intervention and in the assessment. The issues which the other colleague mentioned is the case with the Pakistan as well. We are moving for the pilot, and we will try to add the digital part and the digital assessment as well. But I'm afraid that the challenges we are facing in Pakistan, when you are sitting here in Islamabad, the familiarity with the gadgets of our kids is different when you compare with the Balochistan and the interior Sindh and the South Punjab. But what we have planned that we can introduce and compare the results. Of course, the training is important for the numerators and the facilitators. The cost would be different, but the most important that we wanted to see how you see the difference and the comparability of both results. Uh, Pakistan Institute of Education will be moving ahead with that kind of, and the initial study would, after the pilot, we'll be able to decide for the large scale that whether we will be able to go and expand it, keeping in view the funds we need, keeping in view the expertise we need, keeping in view the training we need to train the enumerators and the facilitator. But the good thing is, and that's very positive happening thing, is Pakistan is entering into foundational learning assessment. So from my side, that's it. Thank you, Bella.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shahid Siroya. This was really very useful, and to see the progressive steps that are being taken by the ministry and the Pakistan Institute of Education, especially being supported in this large-scale program on the data and research and education called DARE, which is being supported by FCDO, but also with other partners, with a very big, or what should I say, a wide-angled approach to be able to accelerate our work on foundational learning and numeracy in Pakistan. And really, to all the panelists who are here, can't thank the leadership enough at PI to be able to not just produce prolific reports, almost one per month or two per month. And I think all of you must go to the website to make sure that you have this with you. And they're also housing the Pakistan Foundation Learning Hub in the same building. So hopefully we believe that this is going to be very exciting as we move forward. Maybe this is a good point and segue to have Salim Salama here, who's the first Secretary Development and Policy Advisor, British High Commission, to see how the investment that development partners are making in foundation learning crisis and support to countries for achieving SDG 4.2.1, which is squarely on learning and quality. How do you see, Salim, the role of regional and global coalitions in shaping education policies and also action on ground to take this forward? We all know we are, under pressure because we are believers that this has to happen if we are looking at aspects of social justice through education. Over to you, Salim.
Thank you very much, Bella and colleagues, for having me here today. And it's a pleasure to share this opportunity with colleagues and to listen to the experience of Mind Spark, a very, very prominent initiative that we have been following for many, many years, and also to hear about the reflections of Dr. Suraya. In response to your question, Bella, I think it's important to think about the role of regional and global coalitions from two points of view. The first is on the technical side, and the second is on the political side. On the technical side, I think experience informed us that the value of these coalitions, whether they are regional or global, is very strong in terms of knowledge exchange. And this is probably one of the most important functions of these coalitions. The fact that regional learning is a prominent part of these coalitions has been demonstrated, whether in a regional level or a global level. The experience in India, the experience in Nepal, whether it is in terms of initiatives of assessment or measurement of learning or curriculum design and teacher professional development is always valuable. And this regional exchange is very, very valuable. But another very important aspect of these regional and global coalitions is on the political side. I think such coalitions offer success stories that are important for the political imagination of policymakers, who are most of the time are operating in a world of constraints. And such coalitions are important peer learning and exchange forums for them to see what is possible in contexts that share similar challenges and share similar constraints as well. So on the technical side and on the political side, I think these coalitions play a very, very important role. I hope this answers the question. I know we have a lot of experience from the foundational learning, a global coalition, for example, that was conveyed between FCDO, World Bank, UNESCO, and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I think the experience from that coalition informed us that in addition to the technical offer that such coalition offer in terms of bringing global expertise, bringing global learning, the political commitment or the work on fostering political commitment is equally important in the work of such coalitions. And hand over back to you.
Thank you, Salim. I think that is very useful to see the whole, what should I say, the amazing knowledge exchange that is taking place, not just under DARE, but also under What Works Hub, supported by FCDO. And of course, just to let everybody know that FCDO has been one of the anchor supporters of ASER Pakistan and also all the innovations that we are doing. And we will come back to you in a bit, but I think this is a good segue to have Noreen from UNICEF to come on board, especially at this time, because Noreen Hassan, also representing UNICEF, another supporter of ASER Pakistan, staunch supporter of ASER Pakistan, but also a very critical partner in how they see the linkage or the spectrum approach to foundation learning from early childhood to lower primary. And that is so important. But also, I think maybe Noreen herself would share how they've been supporting ASER Pakistan and ITA in the development of the ASER app as well. But UNICEF's, of course, global experience is so important, Noreen, in influencing education policy, because you are on ground for both out-of-school children and in-school children who are not learning to address issues of inclusive and equitable foundation learning. So what do you think would be the role to digital assessments if they're accessible for all stakeholders in advancing the SDG 4 goals, in especially looking at improving access with quality in foundation learning? Over to you, Noreen. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good morning, Bela and everyone. Thank you, Bela and the ITA team for this invitation to be part of this important dialogue. I just shared my screen. I wonder if you can see it.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. So then, moving on. I'll start with how UNICEF's global experience can influence education policy for out-of-school children and for children that are in school. UNICEF's global experience in education policy is generally characterized by our focus on equity, inclusiveness, and evidence-based interventions. So I've categorized these into various subheadings: policy advocacy and strengthening. Hello? The first one. Yes, Seher, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you just mute? Seher, can you mute? We can hear Noreen well. Thank you.
All right, so just continuing with policy advocacy, we believe that UNICEF has played a key role in inclusive education systems in countries that have similar socioeconomic challenges to Pakistan. For example, in countries such as Ethiopia and Bangladesh. In Ethiopia, UNICEF has supported the Ethiopian government in mainstreaming, in expanding access to education through alternative basic education programs. These have provided remote communities and incorporated flexible schedules for children who either have to work or have caregiving responsibilities. In Bangladesh, similarly, UNICEF has collaborated with the government to implement a second chance education program. This focuses on reintegrating dropouts and after-school children in formal education systems by offering accelerated learning opportunities. So we believe that in Pakistan also we can learn from these experiences, and these experiences can inform the design of policies tailored to Pakistan's local context. In terms of foundational learning, UNICEF has also used its global influence to elevate the importance of foundational learning within the broader education agenda globally, especially focusing on ensuring that children acquire basic literacy, numeracy, and transferable skills. Bela has already highlighted the Transforming Education Summit interventions, but this was also highlighted, foundational learning was highlighted as a non-negotiable priority during the Transforming Education crisis. UNICEF's advocacy emphasized the learning crisis, how 70% children in low and middle income countries are unable to read or understand a simple text by the age of 10. Then UNICEF also actively participated in drafting the commitment to action. This defined various priorities, such as advocating for the inclusion of foundational literacy and numeracy, which is essential for equitable, inclusive education systems, data-driven insights, and equity lens. Also, this was underpinned by several core strategies for foundational learning. These included strengthening early childhood education, so linking foundational learning with SDG 4.2, then teacher training, especially capacity building to deliver effective literacy and numeracy instruction, digital learning innovations. These were important, and UNICEF advocated for tools such as UNICEF's Learning Passport to support FLN in underserved regions, and then finally community engagement. I'd also like to focus on bridging gaps for out-of-school children and in-school children. So targeted interventions for out-of-school children through initiatives such as Education Cannot Wait or accelerated learning programs, then improving in-school quality and curriculum-relevant school infrastructure to retain students to enhance learning outcomes. Then partnerships and cross-sectoral approaches with government, NGOs such as ITA. The private sector also can be replicated in Pakistan to address some of these systemic challenges. And then finally, on this, community engagement and social mobilization is also very important for inclusive education policies and practices and ensuring foundational learning for all. Then in terms of the second the question that you asked, Bela, on strategies that can be employed to integrate ECD into SDG 4.2. I believe that, so let's start with what SDG 4.2 emphasizes. It emphasizes that all children should have access to quality early childhood development, care, and pre-primary education. And integrating ECD into foundational learning requires a multifaceted approach. Again, I'll start with policy integration. So comprehensive ECD policies, we can learn from countries such as Cuba and Rwanda, where their ECD frameworks integrate health, nutrition, and education. Then allocating sufficient resources for pre-primary education within national budgets. This is absolutely essential, cannot be done without it. Then strengthening pre-primary education. This would require curriculum alignment with foundational learning objectives, especially focusing on cognitive, socio-emotional, and motor skills. Then teacher training, of course, building the capacity of pre-primary educators is vital. In Pakistan, we of course don't have a specialized cadre for pre-primary teachers, which in itself is a problem. But training programs, if the government prioritizes these, should focus on play-based learning and child-centered pedagogy. Then cross-cultural collaboration, so the health, education, and nutrition nexus, I've already spoken about that. Philippines has done a really good job on this. They have a really good ECCD model that integrates these three sectors together. Then, as with the earlier question, parental and community engagement is of utmost importance, coupled, of course, with community-based interventions. Inclusive and flexible ECD services, these are essential to target most of the marginalized and ensure gender and disability inclusion. ITA has also been working on focusing on disability inclusion, something that requires a lot more focus in Pakistan. And then finally, monitoring and evaluation to assess the impact of ECD programs and see if these are actually targeting SDG 4.2 targets. And finally, digital assessments, how to make these accessible for all in advancing SDG goals, particularly to improve access and access to at quality and foundational learning. So this really requires improvements by providing real-time data to improve learning outcomes, especially in foundational learning. We need to focus on personalized learning pathways by identifying individual strengths and weaknesses, and then tailoring support for each child, especially in large and diverse classrooms where traditional assessments may fail. This is what our context requires. Then inclusion and equity, accessibility for all. Digital tools can be designed to accommodate children with disabilities. Again, this is very important to do, especially in remote areas where we need to do this through offline compatible solutions where internet is not available. Then bridging the gender gap. Digital assessments can also be used to identify gender disparities in learning outcomes. Then monitoring and accountability becomes very important, and digital assessments can provide real-time disaggregated data. UNICEF has supported ITA in developing an FLN application, something that we'll be launching very soon, and you'll all be invited. And this will go a long way in supporting monitoring and accountability using digital means, and to ensure that parents, siblings, guardians can also assess children using ASA tools. Then initiatives such as Pratham in India have also leveraged technology to track foundational learning outcomes, and we hope that ITA's latest FLN app will be able to do that. Then capacity building for teachers. This is essential again to identify areas where students are struggling and then enable them to refine their instructional strategies. Then scalability and cost effectiveness to reduce costs associated with traditional assessments. This is important. Mobile-based assessments or partnership with EdTech platforms can expand reach and improve foundational learning outcomes. There is some work that's ongoing, but more needs to be done in Pakistan. And then finally, I would say fostering innovation. This is absolutely important. Gamified assessments or AI-driven platforms can make learning and evaluation more engaging for students, increasing participation, retention, particularly for foundational learning. I'll stop there, Bella. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Noreen. This is very holistic and wholesome. And thank you so much also for the linkage between 4.2 and 4.2.1. All of this is so critical right now, as I think has been endorsed by all 5 foundation learning policies, which are looking at this linkage between early childhood as an anchor, a space or subsector to the foundation learning or the lower primary subspace. And I think this is comes out really strongly, but also the whole aspect of equity when it comes to digital learning. How do you ensure not just the question of being able to access, but ensuring that from a gender perspective, mothers, girls, they do have access to those digital devices and options. I believe we have some ways to go, but in this day and age, one doesn't know how fast we cover the space when it comes to both technology as well as AI. But thank you for a very holistic approach to these issues and the work that needs to be done. I think the coalition approach is the only approach through which we can do, and to have all partners who want to be a part of this. Even in the chat boxes, we are having people ask those questions. What kind of curriculum? Because as curriculum or content is the other side of the mirror of assessment. I think that's something that really needs to come very strongly. But I think it would be great to then have an approach from the Global South with Armando, who is also who's the CEO of the PAL Network, and People's Action for Learning Network is helping in trying to look at new generation tools of ASER, the ICANN and the ELANA tool, which are the new generation assessment tools, to see how they can influence both the national as well as the global discourse on improving foundational learning outcomes. We know that PAL Network is a player, and in the UIS, the UNESCO Institute of Statistics, one of the tools that is that of the PAL network and all the other tools. But, we also seeing PAL network play a very important role in mobilizing the African region in this really strong, actionable movement towards foundational learning. So over to you, Armando, to share a little bit about your journey on the digital tools, the way you're collecting data on both ICANN and ELANA digitally, and what has been the experience so far, and how can we again accelerate being a member of the PAL network, the entire, as I said, this momentum on foundational learning. I think 2030 is around the corner, and we know conservatively what the challenges are, but anything is possible, I think, when the Global South comes together as it does with the PAL network. Over to you, Armando.
Thank you, Bella. Greetings to all participants. Greetings to the panelists. Special greetings to my friend Salim there. The PAL Network is a coalition of 17 civil society organizations across 3 different continents. And in the last years, we have been learning how to come together and to raise the importance of foundational literacy to all children in the world, especially children who are in this common area that we call the Global South. Organizations like ITA or Pratan in India and other organizations in Bangladesh and Nepal, in many other African countries, they came together to have a say to different stakeholders about foundational learning. So what we have learned was that although we could provide evidence about low foundational learning skills for our children, the fact that the assessments were somehow different, the instruments were different, it made somehow difficult for us to speak at one voice. And that's why we jointly decided to come up with common instruments that will allow us to speak at one voice. Those are the instruments that Bela also called the new generation of assessments in the family. And we are talking about the ICANN instrument, which is the International Comparable Common Assessment on Numeracy. And these have been piloted since 2019, and we have run also large-scale assessments using these tools in the last 3 years. And the other one is the PAL ELANA tool, which tries to combine pre-primary and the primary competencies in one assessment tool. And this was designed and run with a digitally adaptive process, allowing us also to have data on real time, on very easy way, although the costs of administration increased somehow. But the beauty of all these tools is that they are both aligned to global frameworks, aligned to global proficiency frameworks, aligned to minimum proficiency levels as defined by UIS. And we are trying to make them align to report to SDGs. But on the other hand, it's very important to ensure that whatever we are measuring makes sense to national governments, to the people in those countries where our members are established. So they are the tools, the instruments, they are both aligned to global framework and the national curriculums of those countries, which gives us possibility to engage with national governments, with regional institutions, and with global institutions as well. And the tools also allow somehow comparability between different geographies that are involved, which at the end of the day makes our voicing together much easier, because what we are reporting can be related to other countries who are involved. So our aim as a network is really to make sure that civil society voices, parents' voices are heard in national discussions, but also in global discussions about foundational learning, bringing sometimes a perspective that is different from the official narratives we get from our governments, and playing a strong accountability role about the prioritization of foundational literacy and numeracy. We are also trying with these tools to reach new levels of inclusion. And we are happy to see that our next assessment, which will be run hopefully in 15 countries, will also start adaptations to include the children in emergency and to assess socio-emotional learning apart from literacy and numeracy. Now, our action is somehow spread globally in 3 different continents, in Asia, in Africa, and in Latin America. But we have been following the African discussions also very closely as part of the Global Coalition on FLN, but also as part of the African movement that was established essentially after the decision by the African Union to indicate the year 2024 as the African Year for Education. And we started a very interesting journey of engaging civil society, engaging donors, engaging government, engaging the African Union institutions to see how can we collectively prioritize foundational learning in the continent. Because when we see the statistics, I think this is the continent where the problem of poor foundational learning is felt the most. And in that process, I think there are 5 very consensual areas that we can see growing in the continent. One is the increase of government commitment to invest more in foundational literacy and numeracy. We saw from a conference organized last year in Arusha for East Africa region, and the Flex conference that we organized in Rwanda, more and more countries participating at the high level, and more statements from government representatives that we need to increase investment on foundational literacy and numeracy. And that's really something to celebrate at this stage. The second is a push for a declaration for a decade for education in Africa, which is coming from different sides to try to solve the problem with foundational learning in the next 10 years. And the belief that this is doable during that period. The third area is also a consensual push to use existing and proven methodologies to improve foundational literacy. There are many proven pedagogies, approaches, including structural pedagogy or teaching at the right level, that have demonstrated ability to improve foundational literacy in very short periods of time. So stakeholders are now trying to mobilize the continent to adopt those proven pedagogies to be introduced in the mainstream education and improve foundational learning for all children. The fourth area is the need for more data. As we speak, the SDGs were adopted 10 years ago, and you may know that it's only now that we have the framework for reporting for SDGs, the criteria for reporting for SDGs were just adopted recently, 10 years, and we are just 5 years down the line to 2030. So assessment should not be the end in itself, but it helps to bring the reality to the table and to ensure that we do have relevant evidence to continue pushing for building the foundations of literacy and numeracy. Although reporting to SDG is very important, it should not be the end in itself. Our assessment should catalyze actors to invest in more alternative ways to improve foundational learning. But data plays a fundamental role in all those options that we are talking. And finally, the importance of increasing parental engagement and societal engagement. The problem is huge, and it cannot be left to governments alone. As much as we try to bring on policies, it's important also to legitimize this process with involvement of citizens, of parents, and all other stakeholders. And this piece is becoming also very noticeable in the current discussions about foundational learning in Africa, essentially. I will stop there and allow also for more questions and discussions later on. Bella, thank you for the invite, and thank you, colleagues, for your
Thank you,
presentation.
Armando, and I can speak as member of the PAL network that we are all available and at the service of foundational learning acceleration, ensuring that it is inclusive and it includes every partner. I think many lessons to be learned from Africa and the decade of learning, as well as the way the African Union is moving on. But I will come to Umar Nadeem at the end, but a quick response from Iza Farooq, because Iza Farooq, as a senior education specialist of World Bank, is also currently with her colleagues leading several big initiatives on foundational learning in Pakistan, but also being informed by several, as she mentioned, or we mentioned earlier, the Foundational Learning Academy, which was held recently in South Asia as well. Iza, over to you. You've heard the challenges, you've heard the initiatives. And I want to just share even in advance that this is part one of our webinar. The next one will be really with the practitioners who are implementing both assessments and solutions digitally, including people from Pakistan and organizations, but also organizations like the Youth Impact, etc. But that's going to be later. And this was the first teaser of our sessions on foundational learning this year. But Isa, over to you. And sorry, but maybe about 6 minutes or 7.
Sure. I'll keep it short. So I think a lot of what has been said by, really, really rich discussions by the colleagues who came before me. So I'm not going to repeat a lot of that. But I think the first question that was posed to me was, on the World Bank's experience globally and how it has informed our work in Pakistan. So I think we've had a lot of internal dialogue over the last couple of years, actually, on, what it takes to develop a strong learning foundation, bring children into school and make sure that they learn well. In the last 20 years of support to Pakistan, 20 years and beyond, the World Bank's portfolio spanned everything from early childhood to secondary level education and also TVET. And what we've done going forward, and we've just announced our country partnership framework, is we're really zooming in on foundational learning as the core building block of later learning. And a few things as a prerequisite is that foundational learning and education delivery cannot be, planned and implemented in isolation. We need to look at it from human capital perspective. So, focusing on education, but also focusing on nutrition, health. Linked to that is water and sanitation, the quality of the crops produced, especially in our rural areas, and the nutrition that children get. But also linked to that, both on learning outcomes and on learning poverty in general, which includes schooling, is what happens at the back end, for instance, financial flows, financial allocations. We know that, the meager development budget that we do get in Pakistan, most of it goes to middle, secondary, higher secondary level, and primary schools get less than 30%. So conversations that actually involve, the prerequisites for a strong education sector. And then when it comes to learning itself, all our projects across Pakistan, we focus on starting from the early years. So, from 0 to 3, engagement with parents on early child stimulation, an enabling environment at home. All our operations in country now have an early childhood education component, and at the pre-primary and the primary level, and ITA has done that exceptionally well, is that we've seen what works across the globe, and we've brought that into our operations in Pakistan. One is, really strong focus on the first language as the language of instruction, structured pedagogy, which is a combination, as we know, of structured lesson plans, learning materials, ongoing support to teachers, and then, targeting teaching instruction by learning level and not by grade, and, for in school and out of school children. We've also seen that other interventions, such as transport-related interventions that help reduce travel times to school, help ensure that, there's safety in school, coordination with, for instance, the BISP, cash transfers, the Wasila-e-Taaleem program that provides incentives for children to go to school, public-private partnerships. And these are, lessons that we've learned from our work in Peru, in various parts of Africa, Colombia, Brazil. I mean, the Sobral model is something that we're all very familiar with. And I think two or three publications that have informed our work. One is obviously by the Global Education Evidence Advisory Panel. One of the co-authors was, a World Bank Education Director, Jaime Saavedra, but just really distilling lessons, not just from World Bank operations, but other successes from around the world. And then I think the World Development Report 2018 that came out that really looked at, what it takes to help solve the learning crisis. And, I'll keep it short, Bela, but just also wanted to say that we've also, while our focus is shifted from, a broad range of interventions to learning outcomes, we do understand the importance of an enabling learning environment in schools for children to come to school, attend regularly, and stay on. So all our operations do have an infrastructure component. We are not supporting going forward construction of new schools, but rehabilitation of existing schools to help eliminate or at least reduce multi-grading, to improve teacher-student ratios. We know how important that is. And then finally, Shahid Saab and other colleagues have spoken a lot about this. Salim has spoken on the Coalition for Foundational Learning. But usable evidence, right? Deploying usable, comparable evidence across the provinces, aggregated at a national level, but able to be disaggregated as well, and helping government counterparts, equipping them with the skills required to use that evidence. And, as the example of the foundational learning policies shows, that sustained and strong political will manifested through policy commitments is also a core element of our support going forward. So I know we're short on time, so I'll end it there.
Thank you so much, Isa. You covered quite a bit, and I want to again underscore the role that many development partners and coalition members are playing to see the South-South coalition expanding. And I do want to underscore the role of the South-South program, in which many of us who have been involved, going all the way to Brazil, to Sobral in Brazil. Many of our senior civil servants who've been influencers in the foundational learning movement, as we see today in Pakistan, have been part of that, both in Pakistan and in Kenya. And of course, Armando is also playing a very important role in taking that forward. So how coalitions are not just, we are talking about coalitions within country, in the region, globally. And I think this is really the way to go. And already in the chat, people are asking, okay, what are the solutions? How do we get? So that's the kind of information role that we are playing. And hopefully the Pakistan Foundation Learning Hub can further accelerate the kind of outreach it can provide to people, easy solutions which are like public goods and open sources, as all of us who are here, FCDO, UNICEF, World Bank, everyone, and the government of Pakistan believes in ensuring that. But I think what you hit upon was also very important, which is looking at the life cycle approach, right from 0 to 3 and onwards. And how do we see, and we forget the entire social protection program, whether it is Nashonuma or Mamta from 0 to 3, is all digitally run. I mean, all the social protection instruments are now, information is coming digitally. So I think the earlier we do it, the better, the more connected we are with early childhood and primary, the better, so that at least we can address and avert those tragedies of not being able to learn early enough to sustain lifelong learning. And I just want to remind also everyone that tomorrow is the Asar Center launch in India. Again, they are focusing, and it's interesting because they're looking at the spectrum of early years as well as primary. So look out for that tomorrow. It's going to be exciting to hear the 20th Asar launch in India as well. That in itself is such a movement. Now, coming to Umar Nadeem, our final speaker, and if there are more questions, we can come back to them. But Umar, you've been, as Sabad Lab has been looking at evidence-based policy making and also digital transformation initiatives. In the work that you've been doing, you're also looking at how, and this recent study that you did, and how connected or disconnected parents are. And if their perceptions about all is good has to be addressed with really all is not good, perhaps, and have to be a part of understanding what the challenge is with their children, but also becoming part of the solutions. And we believe that the walls between the school and the home need to come down. And this has to be seen as a community big movement. Over to you, Umar, and your understanding on what role digital and AI accelerations can play in foundational learning improvements in Pakistan and beyond. Thank you, Umar. Over to you. I'll ask.
Thank you, Bela. Thank you for having us. Congratulations to IT on 25 years. And I think that's a massive contribution that we've had to sort of have in front of us to build on. A really rich deep and wide discussion on the speakers before me, and so I'll just try to connect some of those things and answer your question there, Bela. So I'll start with some of our experience with ground level design and implementation on some of the things that that Pranav mentioned about, and Armando also talked about. So with the support of partners like the World Bank and FCDO, what we've been trying to do is think about the reality of Pakistan in terms of digital and the divide that exists. And while we can start and think about how to bridge that divide, the reality is that that divide will stay and be a constant for at least some time, because there are structural changes required to bridge that divide in a way that will enable us to have universal access to technology and technology-enabled education. So one of the things that we've been working on is redesigning and adapting instruments like EGRA, EGMA, and ASER, and see how they could be converted into low-cost and low-tech solutions for carrying out assessments. And the other lens that's been discussed quite at length is how to get parents involved in this. And given the age group that we're dealing with, access to technology independently is a challenge. And especially at the kind of socioeconomic tiers where this problem is widely clustered. So what we've done is try to use channels like SMS, which does not require internet and can work on basic phones. Phone calls, again, based on some of the experience and evidence from COVID in other countries, could be a very potent tool. And then really using WhatsApp voice messages and text messages at the low end of the spectrum, where high internet connectivity or interactive devices are not a challenge. And we've had some really interesting but mixed results. And so, for example, the SMS only based model on the limited piloting that we did not work. And so primarily because reading text and then replying to those assessment questions through parents is complex for children, is not a great and optimized experience. Phone calls could be potentially really, really interesting, but are relatively high cost and don't offer that kind of scalability. And again, some of the things that MindSpark has been working on, we're trying to see how to make that work here and offer a lot of insights. But the more important thing was the challenge around designing and implementing something like this at scale. And the kind of challenges that we faced were phones and access to devices is largely through fathers. And they're not home all day. And so what is an optimal time for carrying out an assessment through parents when access at home is a time limited enabler? The other thing that, again, because we weren't focusing on large scale assessments and really thinking about that gap that exists between what happens in the classroom until the point we have results on a large scale assessment, was to have this makeshift tracker or live ECG of learning outcomes for parents and teachers alike. And so how do we substitute formative assessments in a more structured way that has both the sort of connections and linkages to schools and institutions, but also parents in terms of assessing and supporting performance. And so things like understanding if parents know what the children would have been taught in school today, what their SLOs were, what they should have covered, what kind of homework they're getting, right down to can parents support conducting these assessments at home, and then using those results and understanding them. And as you pointed out, we see a huge disconnect in both some of the non-state research that has been done on understanding how parents perceive and understand education outcomes. But also the National Achievement Test that Dr. Suraya talked about also highlights that disconnect. And so connecting all of this to technology and evidence, I think the scale of the problem that we face and the diversity of the context in which that problem situates, there is no version of reality, in my point of view, where technology is not a necessary and critical enabler, but how that works is something we have to figure out. And so a lot of effort and thinking will have to go into design. It will have to be tailored to the different needs of segments that we want to service and beneficiaries that we want to bridge this delta for. And so that essentially means that one solution is not going to work, and just having large scale assessments is not the only solution. So we'll have to work with no tech options, we'll have to work with low tech options, we'll have to tech with mid-end and high-end options based on access and availability. And this could be one of the hooks for thinking about digital transformation at the economy and the society level, where enablement is really key. Again, access to internet and services and the digital literacy part of this is as real for a lot of the target groups as is for other countries. And so tackling that is going to be really important. What parents can do to help has been a key area of interest for us. And just trying to understand some of the things. Isa just posted about the GAP report, and one of the findings is that parents could be one of the stakeholders in the ecosystem that are often underrepresented in terms of the learning journey and the process, but could play a huge role. And I think just engaging them is really important. That again, we have to think about differently, because we have a huge cohort of first generation learners where parents are not necessarily equipped or enabled to offer the kind of support that would be required at home, especially given the catch up that we have to play. And so again, some of the research that we've been conducting in the space tells us that parents are super interested and keen on helping children. What they don't understand is how they can do it, and what they really need to do. And so trying to make it simpler for them, trying to adapt for and essentially think around local language, local context, the drivers and motivators is really key. And technology offers us a playground that can help us bridge and connect a lot of these different elements in a fairly dynamic way. The most critical part of, again, doing all of this using technology, carrying out assessments at different tiers and levels, is the data and evidence that comes out of this. And I think that's the part that we don't have to miss or overlook. If we can't use assessments and design actions and then track them in the next round of assessments, then this entire exercise does not yield the dividends that we expect or want it to yield. And I think just the urgency of how this needs to happen means that a lot of really interactive and responsive decision making in terms of what assessments tell us, what kind of data we generate from these platforms can be fed back into learning environments, whether in school or out of school. And I think both will be equally important. And in cases where parents can't offer the direct support, the evolution to how communities can be mobilized and engage will be really essential. And just in terms of AI, because it's the new thing that everyone wants to focus on, I think, again, we'll have to think really about how it can be tailored and contextualized to Pakistan. And the two tiers that could be really catalytic and help accelerate some of these things are how to bridge the kind of more macro issues we have, like literacy barriers, like local language barriers, and get the teachers and the parents on a much steeper curve of how to understand the learning gaps and how to provide support through these platforms. I'll just stop here, cognizant of time and leaving room some questions. But thank you, Bela, and the other colleagues for having me.
Thank you so much, Omar. This was really so wholesome. And I love, I mean, I know Pranav used that analogy, as did you, looking at the live ECG of the assessment trackers or learning trackers, as did Pranav. But I think that aspect of, looking at that we say climate change is an existential threat, so is learning an existential threat, to us, if we do not look at diagnostics more proactively, but also contextualize them across the diversity that is presented of the type of learners, the first generational learners, the mothers, the caregivers who have to be involved in this exercise, but also the challenges of technology, of low tech and high tech. Where do we use which options, and AI for what? And I am reminded of what Stefania said the other day on the 24th, that on the International Day of Education, that AI is not just a technological issue, it's a deeply human one. It's the human enterprise which remains a very big piece of our conversations that we must not forget. I also wanted to underscore, as we celebrate 25 years, so proud of the fact that we've produced those 28 level readers, which we did with Room to Read and the School Education Department in Pakistan. And then, in fact, all the departments, now we have them in 6 languages, including Saraiki, Punjabi, Sindhi, Pashto, Dari, and Urdu. And we hope to have it in Balochi as well. Because I think at the end of the day, it is a combination of social emotional learning as well as foundational. It's the social emotional learning is the gel of making things happen. And you don't feel, things don't happen. And I think this is so important to look at that aspect that we often forget. I'm supposed to be speaking soon, and I said, my loris from what my mother sang as a 1-year-old are still resonating, and that's what makes us also so connected to the issues of learning and the experiences both inside schools and outside. But we have Imran Haider, who has raised his hand. And Imran, go ahead, and if you have a particular question, please do point out who it is to. But before I forget, I just wanted to share with Umar that I think we'd be very happy, along with Papal Network, to pass you on the tools that we have, both for ICANN and Palilana, that you can also look into the battery or the new concoction that we're trying to come up with for assessing foundational learning digitally. Over to you, Imran.
Thank you so much, Bella. This is Imran from PAMS. Uh, and thanks every participant for such an insightful session. So I have a question. So as everyone know, there are wider gaps, not in terms of technological access, but most importantly, technological use. But everyone knows that we call it e-assessments or online assessments. This is going to be the future of for the foundational learning assessments. So my question one is that as it would be very easy for some children to answer those questions uh, through technology driven apps or technology driven app tools. So what are the guidelines or the tools that we're going to embed in the assessment framework that are going to reduce the biasness in terms of digital literacy? This question, and anyone can answer from the participant. And second question, this is from our esteemed colleague from the Indian side. So, are the technology-driven assessment results are compared with the initial assessments carried out on like paper-based assessment or in the conventional manners? Because as we know, sometimes technology unintentionally widen the learning gaps captured through the assessment framework. So I'm hopeful.
Very important questions from Imran. Any one of our panelists who would like to respond to them, and just reminding about the bias challenge, that is there a bias in the way the tools, are developed and implemented, and of course also looking at the way the interpretations of paper versus the digital tools. Am I right in capturing that, Imran?
Yeah. Because India has already carried out this assessment using the technology tool and pre and post, maybe the technology-driven assessment results with the previous ones.
Yes, and even now the asset report coming tomorrow has used, I think, the paper one, not the digital one. I'm not, if I'm correct. So anyway, anybody would like to respond, please do jump in. And I think these are very important questions because does anybody want to come in? Shahid Saroya Saab just left. He had to attend
Happy
meeting.
to jump in. Happy to jump in just to start. And thank you, Imran, for your question. I think the challenge that we have with these new ways of assessment, the distance assessment, is essentially the connection with the child. In our approach, the citizen-led assessment approach, we conduct the assessment one-on-one. So someone will sit with the child and will administer the test orally one-on-one. Maybe that connection can still exist using technology if the tablet or internet connections allow. You can still have a one-on-one communication, but I think the differences can exist if the administration of the test is not allowing that interaction, personal interaction with the child. If you just send the questions and we expect that wherever the child is will respond, I think we miss somehow a level of perception that you can gauge of the capacity of the children to respond to the literacy or numeracy questions in that exercise. For me, the key point is to either you are using technology or not, to still ensure that the interaction with the child exists. Now, in terms of data collection and analysis, the use of technology makes it even easier. You can put in place much easier the check questions. You can put in place the analysis questions and avoid the duplication. The use of technology will also make the availability of data on real time much easier. So the cost of monitoring will also reduce because you have access to data, and machines can also do the cleaning if you put the necessary formulas in place. So my concern has part of this movement of assessing children one-on-one at their homes is to keep the human interaction with the child. If technology can help, good enough.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Armando. I think it's so important what you've pointed out. But I also wanted to suggest to Imran. Recently, I just saw that PAMS has done a whole exercise with the EMIS focal persons in all provinces and the federal areas. Now, I think a similar kind of an exercise on assessments is needed, where we can all, some of us who are critical players in this on foundation learning, come together to really understand how this is being transacted, understood, and to ensure that they are familiar with all these nuances of bias, of differences if you do paper versus digital. And, we've been doing this paper versus digital even over the phone-based learning and so on for some time since COVID began. So we've got, I think, enough of data, enough of evidence to be able to take this forward. But thank you for raising this. But maybe we can come, this conversation that we are having is the start of many conversations that should happen this year and bring many people on board, including those from the inclusive side, those who are working with children with disabilities, and we need to address those as well. I think also I wanted to say there was another question that had come up, and that question that has come up from Manise Bano from Sahel to say, what has been happening, since you've been doing ASAR? Has the curriculum changed? Has the pedagogy changed? And Manise, I'm happy to say, yes, it is changing. But, how do we do the alignment of the content, the pedagogy, the assessments, and the way then they are become a part of the policy and so on? We're seeing greater reflection of policy and the foundation learning policies. If you don't have, Seher is going to send you all the links to the Pakistan Foundation Learning policies that have come up. But we need to see more action. And I'm happy to say, I know that we may have other people there, but the goal program for girls' education in school and out of school is actually using that content being finalized with the government to be used for 257,000 in school and out of school children, mostly girls, to be able to see how we can see the pedagogy and the content and the assessment done in a manner that really brings foundational learning to the fore. So new initiatives that are happening across Pakistan and across many countries, we heard from Pranav as well, the more central and the more mainstream they are, the more power they have of sustaining. I will stop at that, and maybe we will try. This is recorded. It was on Facebook Live as well. But what we will do is to get all of you and get the presentations for everyone so that it is there. And do remember that we will be following this up with a series more in 2025, at least 4 of them, as part of ITA's 25-year celebrations, and with resilience and grit to move forward with all the alliances that we have, because that's the only way that we'll be able to make the kind of difference we do. Over to Seher to thank you all. And it's just been a privilege and a delight to have had all the panelists and the people present attending this, those here on on the Zoom and those on Facebook. And we will, your questions were very, very precious. Thank you. And Noreen answered some questions on the UNICEF side.
Thank you so much, everyone. On behalf of our team, I want to extend our heartfelt thanks for joining us. To all our panelists as well, who played a key role in making the webinar a success, and we are extremely grateful for the time and the effort each and everyone has dedicated to preparing and participating. As Bela mentioned, this is going to be a series of webinars, and we will connect with each and everyone in future. Thank you so much for joining in us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Seher, for organizing it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Ji. Sure. फिर सोना ये ले जाओ बस ये बता दूँ मैं ले जाती नहीं आप ये रखो